welcome back to the extended connectivity track. So for our last session today, we have Allan joining us from Klipfolio, who's going to share his presentation, which is Succeeding with Data, how Klipfolio embeds connectivity to power its self-service analytics. Take it away, Allan.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Marie. So you know what? We'll just maybe wait for a few seconds while people join, and then I'll get started with the introductions as well. All right, so you know what? I'm going to get started with the intros. So again, thanks, Marie, for introducing us and having us here today. I've got Ching with me as well. Ching is our CTO at Klipfolio, and he's going to be here largely helping us with some of the Q&A at the end. So if you've got questions, if you've got specifically technical questions, Ching would definitely be the right person to ask. All right, so we're talking today about our journey and how we went from having an in-house team managing a lot of connectors and how we eventually chose to work with CData, the growing pains through that, and then kind of what's next on our roadmap and kind of the future of how we see the market evolving. So I'm going to just get into a little bit about myself. So I'm the CEO at Klipfolio. I've been with Klipfolio since the start. I'm one of the co-founders. There's two co-founders, and we have been in the data and the analytics space for a long time, really helping customers, mostly small customers, understand what to do with their performance data, make better decisions. And it's been a huge, long journey ever since there was business intelligence apps that were on desktop, like on-prem and on desktop. We were probably one of the first companies to actually launch a BI tool in the cloud. So certainly we've seen a lot of the industry grow, and one of the things that is so incredible about the BI space, it always seems to reinvent itself. So, anyways, that's me. We're all based in Ottawa, and I'll tell you the story of how we continued. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'll sort of give some context as to what we were doing before, how we were evaluating different options, how we started working with CData, and then sort of what the outcomes were of all of that. So as I mentioned, if you've got questions, save them up. I'd be happy to answer them along with Ching as well. All right, so let me just maybe start with a bit of sort of background or context, just so that you know who we are and why this was a challenge. So we've always targeted small and mid-sized businesses. That's been our bread and butter. And as that turns out, we've got a lot of customers. We've got about 1,600 customers globally. We've got over probably 50,000, I think it's probably closer to 60,000 users, again, within these small and mid-sized companies. And there's a lot of active and daily use of our platform. So folks are looking at this data that they're collecting on a daily basis. They're using it in stand-ups. They're using it in their weekly reports. So many customers are really running their business and making decisions on these data points using our platform. So what is important to this sort of go-to-market is that really most of our customers don't have a data warehouse. They don't have a data team. They might have somebody who is sort of head of biz ops, or maybe somebody that's part of the web development team, or maybe a sort of an Excel guru who really sort of likes diving into the data, but they definitely don't have a mature data infrastructure or a data practice within their companies. And again, that sort of goes part and parcel with small and mid-sized companies. They need to make decisions fast, but they don't have that in-house talent that often is associated with working with lots of data and making analytic decisions. So because of that, the integrations and working with data, it really needed to be self-serve. So that was key to us. Now, what we originally had is we had a team of about 5 to 7 developers um, who were in-house building these integrations into various different systems. And just so that it's clear, our customers wanted to connect to things like Google Analytics or HubSpot or Zendesk or Stripe, and pull that data back and then, massage that data and put that into dashboards and analytic reports. So we had a staff, in-house staff, that was really responsible for building all of those connections, those API endpoints, and in some cases, for the more popular services, we would put a UI on top of it. So for Salesforce, for example, or Google Analytics, or a few others, there was an interface that we built on top of their API that made it a little bit easier for an end user to self-serve and be able to choose the fields, the measures, the dimensions, the time grain, even the grouping, and pull that data back into our reporting platform. Now, one of the things that was also really problematic was that all of these endpoints were not homogeneous. They were constantly changing. They were updating. We had a fairly healthy practice of keeping on top of things, but it was becoming costly and difficult to maintain that at speed. So certainly a lot of times we were perhaps behind the 8 ball and we had to sort of catch up. And one of the things especially about sort of the non-technical business crowd is they really expect uptime and data integrity. It's one of those strange things, when you're working with a data team, they understand how complex and how difficult sometimes it is to maintain this data pipeline. But an end user, really, they're looking for just this data continuity, data integrity. So when they're looking at their numbers in HubSpot, if it doesn't match what they're seeing in Klipfolio, that's an immediate issue. So, of course, maintaining all of this and managing all of this is becoming very costly and expensive. So, about 5 years ago, we started thinking that we needed to have a different approach, and we started looking at different vendors that we would then choose and integrate. So, we had 2 fundamental goals. The first one, no surprise, we needed to unlock these non-technical users. So the folks that are within our small and mid-sized companies where they don't have access to a data team or a technical developer. And then, of course, the second goal was it had to be less expensive than our current practice of maintaining a small team of 5 to 7 developers. So within those 2 overarching goals, simplicity for the end user was key. So I've said it, before, it had to be usable by a non-technical user. And then the other thing is the data that came back, oftentimes in our then solution, data would come back as JSON or XML formatted data. And if you present any kind of an accountant or a marketing person with tree structured data, nested, and they contact support, and support says, "Oh, well, you have to use XPath," that's totally not going to fly. So the data had to come back in a spreadsheet-like familiar manner. The second goal, of course, was the solution that we were looking at, it had to have the popular services. Like I mentioned, Facebook ads and Google Analytics and HubSpot and Zendesk, those had to be supported. And then we had to have assurance that there was a roadmap of new services, new popular services that were being developed as well. And then maybe the last one on the unlocking non-technical users was the trust relationship needed to be maintained. So we had to have a vendor that could be fully white labeled. So our customers trusted our relationship. We needed to make sure that was maintained. And we needed to have something that was fully integrated into our cloud infrastructure. So trust and authentication had to remain with Klipfolio. And then the final one, on the cost side, it had to reduce our development costs in-house. So we started evaluating, and we started off looking at 22 vendors. And I'm sure you've been through this process as well. We had this massive spreadsheet. We had a decisioning matrix. So 11 of those 22 vendors were eliminated right away. And we whittled it down to 2 vendors who we then had a bake-off with. Now, from a feature point of view, of course, we were looking at the number of connectors and the domain in which those connectors were present. So did the vendor have connectors that were used by small and mid-sized businesses? Pagination, JSON normalization, that had to be handled. We had to have good error handling back and forth. It had to be able to scale, not only to our customers, but also to the number of users and the activity that we were seeing. We were not pushing out monthly reports. These were folks that were using the app every single day. And then, of course, it had to have really solid auth and security features. We evaluated the pricing model as well as we were looking at vendors. We had to make sure that whatever vendor we chose was aligned with how we did business. Our cost of sales and our cost to go to market for every customer is very, very low. It has to be because we have a volume-based business. So we had to make sure that we were able to scale with a solution that mapped to that economic reality. We also needed to make sure that whatever vendor we chose, as we roll this out over the first couple of years, the pricing would help us roll into this. And CData was one of the vendors that was flexible on that. And then we also, of course, said, well, how are we being charged? What is the metric by which we're being charged? Is it users, connectors, API calls? So that, of course, all factored into the relationship as well. And then maybe the final thing that we used in our decisioning tool was we took a look at the business itself. So because this was such a fundamental part of how we were going to move the business forward, we needed to make sure that the vendor that we chose was stable, they were reputable, and we had a good relationship and ability to sort of work with these folks moving forward. So those 4 pillars and the items that we looked at, we went through a very exhaustive decisioning process, and eventually, I mean, that's why I'm here. We chose CData as our vendor of choice, and we chose them really because of the breadth of the library. We were very impressed with the technical competence of the engineering team that we had direct access to, so we were very pleased with that. We loved the idea that their tool, their library, was able to serve as this translation layer, this homogeneous layer that we could then push all of our connectors through. And then, of course, the other thing was, because it's a library and we can embed it, and white label it, of course, everything, all of the authentication remained with Klipfolio. So it sort of solved the ultimate goals. We wanted non-technical users to be able to query through Klipfolio, so it did that. And then it also opened up this really cool ability for us to develop these pre-built metric templates. And they have become actually a very core part of our solution. I'll show you some of those in a few slides. So let's just go through a few of the kind of growing with CData issues that we had and kind of where things are at right now. And obviously, anytime you do any kind of complex working relationship, there are going to be challenges along the way. And I just want to highlight those because I think it's frustrating, but it is normal. And if you have a good relationship, you do work through them. So we started by integrating only about 10 of CData's connectors. Immediately, we were surfacing lots of bugs. There seemed to be missing endpoints. And it almost seemed, now this is about 5 years ago, it almost seemed as if some of these endpoints or some of these connectors were actually never thoroughly tested by the larger customer base of CData. So now one thing that was a saving grace is we had immediate and good access to their engineering team. That was something that came through in the evaluation process. So even though we were surprised by the fact that there was too many bugs, way too many bugs for our liking, the engineering team was able to jump on it right away, fix things. There was a good cadence. We had a lot of discussions with them. So a lot of those things got resolved and hardened quite quickly in the first couple of years. Um, as we sort of progressed with CData, we actually did find that the the quality did continue to suffer. So we did find that we were having to do too much testing, and again, that's something that we worked very very closely with the CData team on, um, and it had impacts. Bugs were being released into our production environment and impacting customers. So there was probably a number of times where these were red alert moments, and again, we had to really work with the team to make sure that they had a testing process and they were improving on their processes. And again, the team did. We had really good interactions with them, and they always came through. However, their internal processes still needed hardening. Now, the other thing that I think we've worked with them is, HubSpot introduced a new version of their API. Google Analytics went from universal to GA4. Sometimes those endpoints, or the availability of those endpoints, they took too long. And our customers, being small and mid-sized businesses, they're moving on to new versions very quickly. They don't have the same rigor or timeframes as enterprise customers do that take 5 years to move from one platform, or maybe even longer. So our customers were moving to these new endpoints very quickly. So we needed our choice here to have that same cadence. So the current state is things are a lot more stable. The processes inside of CData, the testing and the quality, have definitely increased. So we are seeing this. We now have a stable suite of probably the most popular CData drivers that are in production and are being used by our customers. And then we still manage a small and maybe some of the less popular connectors in-house. But again, I think throughout this entire process, the relationship with the engineering team is what continued to impress us. And the fact that they continued to work on these things and improve their own processes was really, really key to our success. So let me just show you a few things. So obviously we had those two goals. We did unlock technical users, and I'll show you what that looks like. And we did also save costs internally. So I'll just show you very briefly what this looks like in our app right now. So this is what we call Query Builder. And this is an ability for a non-technical user to go in this case, it's Zendesk, the ticketing software. They can go in and, using this UI, which is built on top of the CData ability to fetch data from Zendesk, they can go and see, oh, there's certain popular fields that I can choose. So I'm going to check off the fields that I want. I can write filters. I can massage the data, and I can very easily see the data in a tabular format, something that makes sense to me, and bring that back and then build metrics and dashboards out of that. So this was something that was not possible in our previous version, or at least we had not invested in that, making it go so far. And the fact that CData offers this homogeneous layer really, really makes it a lot easier. I also mentioned earlier that we have these templates, these pre-built metric templates. Again, this is something that the CData library really opened up for us. Again, because it was this homogeneous layer, we were able to build hundreds of beautiful, out-of-the-box, popular metric templates. So here's a bunch for Shopify. So you can see your abandoned checkouts and your customers and your gross sales. For Salesforce, we've got a bunch as well. QuickBooks, Google Ads. So there's just tons of these metrics that are available. And then each of the metrics this would be a representation of like a Google Ads ad click metric, but it's rich. It's got depth in its segmentation. So again, the CData library allowed us to do this at scale and do it a lot more efficiently than if we had done this in-house. So, and we're quite proud of the way the solution turned out, and certainly our users are loving this stuff. So just to sort of wrap up, I think everybody also is sort of thinking about how does AI, what is the next steps, and how does data and meaning and definitions, how does that sort of map to the future of helping users again? And AI is particularly important to us again because our users are not data analysts, they're not data scientists, so they need to be able to interact with their data with trust. They need to be able to interact with it with natural language that potentially might be not as crystal clear as a data analyst or a data scientist might ask a question. So the idea of bringing data in and then defining it, and you can see right in the middle of this diagram is we've got this metrics definition block. That really is at the core of what allows an AI to actually generate a good trusted output. So without that definition or that understanding of what the metric is all about, you're just poking in the dark. You're asking questions and the AI doesn't know what the context is. So context and semantics and meaning are really, really important. So it's one of the things that we've been thinking about for the past probably 6-7 years. This idea of semantics and meaning is really, really important to us and the future of AI. So it's something that we're quite passionate about. And I'll leave you with this one here. This is a pretty old guy, but the quote was I thought quite pertinent. So the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. This is Socrates. So I thought, what we're doing and what CData is doing helps us define the metrics that matter and then allow for better outcomes and that wisdom that everybody's looking for. So anyways, I'll leave it there. Marie, I don't know if there's any time for questions.
I sadly don't think we will have time for question either today, but it was a really, really great session, Alan. I love how you talked about your journey and how you built your partnership with us at CData. So I thought it was a fantastic session. And if there are any questions from the audience that we want to follow up on, I know John shared a link to our community where we can continue the conversation. So thank you to Alan. Thank you to Ching for joining us today.